Cave paintings, petroglyphs, pictographs, semaphores, airmail, radio, fax machines, and pagers. The sheer amount of ingenious communication methods practiced throughout history is astonishing. Let's discuss some of the most influential ways people have connected to one another over the years. Smoke signals and fire beacons. Signal fires have been used practically everywhere around the world throughout the centuries as a form of long-distance communication. Whether it's ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, or England, fire and smoke have been used most prominently as a warning of an imminent enemy invasion for nearly all of recorded history. An early usage of this communication method took place thousands of years ago on the Great Wall of China. Using beacon towers, military intelligence was relayed by smoke signals during the day and the torchlight of the towers at night. The number of signals raised held specific information in regard to the quantity of approaching enemy troops. Interestingly enough, these Chinese fire beacons are translated to "smoke of the wolf," because the fuel of these towers was oftentimes a mixture of the dried dung of wolves and vegetation. Smoke signals and fire beacons predate many forms of communication and pass information effectively over hundreds of miles. There are even records in the journals written by Lewis and Clark that tell of Native Americans in North America using smoke signals to alarm other Native Americans of invading European colonizers. Mirror signaling, later known as heliography, has been conceptualized since recorded history. The Greek mathematician Archimedes was said to have created large mirrors that were used in battle against the Romans during the siege of Syracuse in 213 BC, using rays of the sun to set ships ablaze. While this was later proven to be a myth, it's shown how long people have thought of using mirrors for communicative purposes. The first development of the heliograph during the 1800s used sunlight to reflect beams over very long distances. It became commonplace for every soldier to learn how to use mirror signaling in the US Army starting in 1886, and is still being taught today. Typically, this form of communication uses the duration of the flashes of light corresponding to the dots and dashes of Morse code, but there have been records of other varying formats of usage. What's so amazing about heliography is the vast distances the light can travel, and how it can be used without being noticed by anything outside of your intended target. It's not unheard of for signals to travel over 150 miles in ideal conditions, but even in cloudy weather, it's still an effective communication system, although less visible. Carrier pigeons. Centuries ago, people noticed the remarkable navigational abilities of carrier pigeons. Dating back to ancient Rome and Greece around 200 BC, carrier pigeons helped to present the winners of the Olympic Games. These animals are typically overlooked as just city birds, but have long served humans quite well as a form of long-distance communication. Most pigeons learn to fly to only one place, but it's also possible to train them for bidirectional services if they feed in one place and sleep in another. Although homing pigeons are able to fly over 1,000 miles, most are used for shorter missions. Not only are they capable of traveling long distance, these birds can fly very quickly. The average pigeon can fly around 60 miles per hour with good weather conditions, but racing pigeons have been clocked at 90 miles per hour. These brave birds were even war heroes during World War I and World War II, despite the widespread usage of telegraphs and radio communication because of their speed and how difficult it was to intercept their secret messages. Although carrier pigeons aren't commonplace in the 2020s, they still represent a huge milestone in our advancement of messaging capabilities. The Pony Express. Several thousands of people set out on the Oregon Trail traveling west during the 1840s. The Mormon immigration to Utah in 1847 and the gold rush of 1849 caused many to uproot their lives and expand westward. The need for access to quicker forms of communication and mail service past the Rocky Mountains was quite prevalent. At first in the 1850s, we saw the rise of private carriers and a small mail service, but that was only a partial solution to this problem. It wasn't until 1860 when what was known as the Pony Express was created by Alexander Majors, William Hepburn Russell, and William B. Waddell. The Pony Express was a greatly needed mail service that connected the eastern United States to the west, unlike anything ever seen before. They made it possible for people to communicate over 1,800 miles apart in only 10 days. All the way from Missouri to California, this was the most efficient letter delivery system ever seen before because of the roughly 190 strategically located relay stations. The Pony Express became closely associated with the Old West, but was only in service for 18 months before it came to an end due to the rapid expansion of the telegraph line. Telegraphs. Before electric telegraphs were created, the main form of mass, long-distance communication was through the printing press. The idea of sending electric signals across wires had been conceptualized since the 1700s, but it wasn't until the 1830s when a New York University professor by the name of Samuel Morse began working on his unique system. Although he wasn't the first to invent the idea, he was the first to create a simple, efficient, and working business model that became implemented in the 1840s. For the very first time in history, we were able to instantly communicate across vast distances. He created a system of dots, dashes, and spaces known as Morse code that represent letters of the alphabet, numerals, and punctuation marks. Telegraphs had many militarized purposes and were used during the Civil War and well into the 20th century. Telegrams had an enormous impact on world affairs, most notably seen in the 1917 Zimmermann telegram, which contributed to the shift in public opinion that brought the United States out of a neutral position during World War I. Widespread adoption of telegraph systems facilitated the growth of global communication and paved the way for other forms of long-distance communication we rely on today. Eventually, the telegraph system lost relevancy due to the development and ease of access to radio communication and telephones. The telephone. While Alexander Graham Bell is credited as the father of the telephone for being the first creator to have his work patented in 1876, he was not the first to come up with the idea of a talking telegraph. Even earlier in 1849, there was an Italian immigrant in the United States named Antonio Meucci who began to create a design of the first telephone. 1871 comes along and Antonio officially filed a caveat ready to announce his invention of the talking telegraph. Unfortunately, due to hardships, he could not renew his caveat and his role in the invention of the telephone became overlooked. The telephone gave us instantaneous communication with one another and was swiftly integrated into society. This creation paved the way for other key inventions such as the internet and cell phones. Never before have we seen such an increase of the effectiveness of emergency services thanks to the decades of work put in by brilliant minds. Fast forward to 1973, and we saw the adaptation of the first cell phone created by Marty Cooper when working for the company Motorola. What began as a brick, weighing in at 2.5 pounds, the cell phone became one of the most game-changing devices for human communication of all time. Over time, this breakthrough slowly improved as people sought to reduce the size and weight per cell phone. Eventually, after many minor improvements over many years, cell phones evolved into compact smartphones that we now have the pleasure of using today. Thank you for joining me here on Epochs and Eons. If you'd like to see more videos like this, subscribe.